Hi there, in this video we're going to be talking about the Three of Wands. I think it's, when you're looking at the Thoth deck, it's dangerous to apply the meanings of the Waite deck to the equivalent of the Thoth deck and just think that that is actually going to be something that is going to suffice. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, but on this card, which is the Three of Wands, which is called Virtue, it's one of those cards where there is a distinct difference between the two. I think the phrase for the original Three of Wands from the Golden Dawn, at least, was the Lord of Established Strength. But here we've got Virtue. So what is Virtue? Well, let me give you an example. I think I'd left my wallet in a clothing stroke supermarket chain in the changing rooms, and someone had lifted a £20 note from my wallet, but they kept the wallet there. They didn't take the wallet itself, they just took the £20 note. So from that action, they didn't act from their highest virtue, which would just be to hand the wallet in. They actually took £20, from this wallet that was left there. But then again, they didn't take the whole wallet, so they weren't acting in their worst fantasy, as it were. So the most virtuous act would be just to hand the wallet in. And they did like a mid range action there, not the best that they could do. I actually saw this person come out, but I thought, well, they may need the £20 more than me, and yes, I do need it, but they may need it more, so I didn't query that. So that's what this video is about. Working to your highest good, that very the top level of expression of your personality. We're going to go on to the divinatory meanings now of the card, and for those of you that want a more in-depth appraisal of this card, where these divinatory meanings come from, the more spiritual aspects of the card, because the divinatory meanings are very, very important. There's no question about that, but the spiritual aspects are on a level higher than the divinatory meanings. So I don't want to prejudice this video, but the divinatory meanings for me are the lowest expression of the card, but still very, very important. Okay, so we'll go on to the divinatory meanings, both upright and reverse, next. And for those of you that actually want a more in-depth interpretation of this card, we'll look at where these divinatory meanings arose from, because they didn't just spring out of nowhere. Okay, so we'll look at divination next. I talked a little bit about the definition of virtue in the introduction, but with Wikipedia it states that virtue is moral excellence, a positive trait or quality deemed to be morally good and thus is valued as a foundation of principle and good moral being. One of the difficulties is that morality does change with different countries and cultures. So other words to describe virtue are things like kindness, we said morality, incorruptibility, honour, integrity, purity and trustworthiness. So these are the sort of terms that the divinatory meanings are based around. So we'll look at some of the positive traits or divinatory meanings of the Three of Wands. So first point, it's important for you to operate from a place of integrity before making decisions at the moment, and to make sure that you have clarity in both your mind and heart as much as possible before acting to get the best results. So unless you have clarity at this time, then don't act. And if we are clear, if we've done the work of the Ace of Wands and the Two of Wands, and sort of gone beyond the struggles of the two, where we get the opposites, then we can apply what we've learned, and it's a great time to put our ideas into action. So if we're having difficulty moving forward with our life plan, one of the positive things we can do is make a list of our virtues, our positive traits, because that actually gets them down. It makes us have a space from our nature, our positive nature, and we can actually center our plans for the future around what we can do best. And it says here, open your heart like the lotus blossoms in the card. Third thing I've said is using our skills constructively in the world, and things that are a reflection of our highest good, because the tarot is always pushing us to be the best that we can possibly be. And this may be in relation to our work, our day job, hobbies, could be charity work, community work, spiritual studies. So there are a wide variety of spheres that we can apply this card to. Behaving openly and honestly with others, being a good listener, so being open like the lotus blossoms, and giving advice where appropriate from our highest perspective. Those are some of the definitions. Others that have come to mind since are, because it's Sun in Aries, and the Sun in Aries is the beginning of the horoscope, beginning of the astrological year, is to do with birth and creation, creating new business plans, which is up here, and those type of themes. So we'll now move on to the reversed meanings of this card. So if the card is reversed, some of the possible divinatory meanings associated with this could be a lack of clarity. So if we're not clear on what we're doing, then it's not a great time to move forward with any plans. It's time to take a step back and go back to the planning of the Two of Wands. Just get rid of this yellow. It's a bit psychedelic, that colour. Number 2, actions which have been negative, ill thought out, and now there are consequences. So we may have moved forward with plans and it's not really gone as we would wish. Maybe we haven't been acting to our highest standards, so we need to assess what's distracting us from being the best we can be. Point number 3. So we may find that our work and daily life are not fulfilling. They may not be getting the best out of us. We may feel that we're really not using our potential. I know many people feel that in the workplace, which is just very money orientated and getting more so. So it can indicate the need to create space, therefore, to reconnect with what you really want out of life and to make you feel useful and fulfilled. Point number 4 could relate to us or our friendships, and there not being an honesty there either from us or from other people, again depending on the other cards in the reading. So the lotus blossoms here are pointing downwards, they're not open and receptive. So that's just a few of the examples associated with the reverse of the Three of Wands. I'll come back to divination at the end of the video when I'll go through the Three of Wands in respect to the different positions in the Celtic cross. We'll take just a quick look at what's happening in the Rider-Waite deck. I've got 2 different versions of the Rider-Waite here, which is why they look a little bit different. So with the 2, we had the figure here who was within safe ground, within his castle here, and the wands are firmly locked in place, or at least one of the wands is locked in place, and he's holding the other one firmly. He's looking at his globe, the world, he's making plans, what's the best course of action for the future. Now, with the Three of Wands here, we've got the bay here, which is seen here. He's actually moved out from his safe ground, he's put his plans into action, going out into the world. You've got sort of ships on the sea indicating commerce, but this can equally apply to not just business adventures, but other work-related activities, whether they be community work, spiritual. I went through all the various different scenarios in the previous section. So it's all about putting plans into action and getting things off the ground in a practical sense. In this section, we'll just go through how numerology relates to the Three of Wands. So we've got the triangle, which is the triad, as opposed to the dyad associated with the Two of Wands. So you've got 3 points here. We had the opposite points in the Two of Wands, where that was at the planning stage, viewing pros and cons of things. With the three, we have more of a harmony between the two opposites. So this is a two-dimensional figure. It's the first geometrical figure. It's not three-dimensional, it's two-dimensional, as we'll see as we move on through the numerology series. And I'm just going to go through a few places where the number 3 is found. Well, 3 is found in things like the Holy Trinity, the Father, Son, the Holy Ghost, which is all to do about consciousness. There are 3 phases to the moon: the waxing, waning, and full moon. We've got beginning, middle, and end, birth, life, and death, that sort of thing. It also applies to the tree of life in the supernal triangle, the top bit of the tree with the 3 sephira here, and the Three of Wands is associated with B.O.T.A, which we'll talk about in more detail in the next section. The Three of Wands is also associated with, or the number 3, with other cards within the deck. So I do like to include other cards in my tutorials, because I like you to see the interrelationship between the particular card and others in the deck. So it's like an interconnected energy network. The Empress here is the third in the Atu number 3 of the major arcana. Again, you've got the lotus blossom here, similar to the lotus blossoms or lotus wands in the Three of Wands, and she is obviously pregnant, and therefore you've got this idea of birth repeating there, and indeed you've got the phases of the moon here. The Three of Swords is to do with sorrow, and that can involve emotional pain, sometimes caused by a third person. So we might have a relationship where there's infidelity possibly. And the Princes here, which are part of the Court series, relate to the third letter of the Tetragrammaton, which is Vowel, and is the product of the Knight and Queen. Three is also associated with problem, reaction, solution. So you may have heard about that in different contexts. It's initially spoken about by a German philosopher, Hegel, and called that thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, but that's just like an aside point. So the initial inspiration here is where we get a problem, which is, it's not a problem, but it's the beginning, the spark, which gives us something that we either connect with or we don't. We've got the reaction to that, which is our planning, and the solution, which is the manifestation in the in our practical world. So that's another context of the 3. I talk about that a little bit in more detail in the notes, but don't want to go too much off track, and certainly we don't need to understand anything about philosophy from previous centuries and that sort of thing, but I just included that because it was relevant and it can link in. Okay, so we'll move on to the Three of Wands in relation to its position on the Tree of Life next. So we'll deal with the Three of Wands in relation to the Tree of Life next. This is our Tree of Life here, and the red line here indicates the lightning flash, where energy is descending from Spirit in Keter at the top here, down to Malkut, which is its most earthly realm. So the Three of Wands, as are all the threes, are associated with the third Sephiroth here, which is Binah, And B.O.T.A gives rise to and shapes form. So with the 2 here, with Hokmah, you have the force, which is emanating from Keta, and what B.O.T does, it gives rise to form. So it's this theme of birth and creation, which is again represented by the Tree of Life. And if we look at the position of the 3 of Wands in relation to the 4 trees, because there are 4 trees of life which are all interconnected, the Wands are associated with Absolute here, the first world of inspiration, the world of divine, it says here, and it's the most purest aspect. You've got that sense of fire which burns through things and purifies. So this is B.O.T in Absolute. So I've said that B.O.T gives rise to form. That's like the shaping and the outpouring of energy from Hokmah. I've said it's associated with the supernal triangle here, and B.O.T. So with regards to the naming of this being virtue, perhaps one way to look at it is to say that it's in the most pure, the world of divine. It's not in the most earthly tree of life here. It's actually close to the very top, and therefore virtue gives us a sense of purity of action, purity of motive, that sort of thing, striving to be the purest and best expression of who we can be in the world. B.O.T giving rise to form also has like a negative side, because on the one hand we have this idea of life, the shaping of things, the beginning of material things, but also we have implicit in form is something which is finite. It has this element of birth, death and rebirth, and therefore again that's another 3, and so we have a finite entity. So whatever gives rise through this card here in terms of birth, in terms of business plans, in terms of what we want to do in the world, note that it's probably a stepping stone. It's something that may not last forever, or it won't last forever. So again, there is a transient element to the number 3 as well. B.O.T is also associated with being the great sea. It's like the sea which gives birth to form, and we can see that in the 3 of Wands here, sorry, the 3 of Discs, where you've got these waves around the figure in the center of the card. In biblical terms, water represents consciousness. So when we have things like baptism in water, in biblical terms, it's just a representation of a change of consciousness. It's got nothing to do with dipping the head underwater at all, as I've indicated in various different articles on my website. So I think that concludes. It's also B.O.T here. It's to do and is related to Saturn. Saturn is all to do with time, and therefore it's also gives rise to restrictions, because time can be and is normally associated with a finite period of time, and therefore the fact that you have got this Sephiroth here ruled by Saturn does again give this whole card a finite nature. So success can happen in this card, but it will only be for a limited period of time. Okay, we'll now move on to more astrological associations with the 3 of Wands. We have the decan wheel here, which mimics the horoscope, the natal chart. Begins with Aries going all around to Pisces. So Aries is the first house, it's the house of spring, renewal, birth, creation, that sort of thing, which is a common theme in this card. And if we look at a close-up of that, it's between 11 and 20 degrees. So it occupies this middle decan of Aries, and that is ruled by the sun. So we've got the sun in Aries. Sun is exalted in the sign of Aries, which means it's strengthened, and that is very favourable for the meaning of this card. And we would look at this card as being a good card to have. It looks very sunny and bright. So the energy of this card plays out astrologically in the fact that you've got this energy, enthusiasm and magnetism of the sun, which pours through the sign of Aries, which is to do with beginnings, renewals, great leadership, discovering things. And so astrologically, this card says that if we've done the work of the previous two cards, then in the Three of Wands, it gives us a great opportunity to start things like business adventures and other projects in our life. So we'll next move on to the specific symbolism which is contained within the Three of Wands of the Thoth deck. Looking at the Three of Wands here, there doesn't seem to be an awful lot going on, but in fact there's a bit more than what first appears to the eye. And we've got a lot of flames here which relate to the previous two cards. So if we break it down, we look in the center of the card here, we've got 6 bright straight flames here. And that number 6 refers to the sun. How does it do that? Well, we go back to our tree of life here, and the 6th Sephiroth here is in the center of the tree, associated with the sun, and it has the harmony and stability of the of being in the center there. And again, we talked about harmony and stability with the triad. So this is where it all interlinks. We've got 4 remaining straight flames which are duller in colour, and they are to do with the crossed 2 of Wands and the Doges there, and we'll see that in a one of the slides coming up. And we have these golden shafts there which again indicate a reference to the sun. We have 10 curvy flames here. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And that is in relation to the Ace of Wands. So if we look here, we've got the 10 flames in the Ace, which we dealt with, relating to the Tree of Life. We've got that cross here, which is the duller straight flames there. So here we have the interconnectedness between the Ace, the 2 and the 3. We can go further and say that there are 9 petals to each one of these lotus wands. So we've got 1, 2, 3 there, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and there's our 9th one here. Again, the number 9, going back to the Tree of Life, associated with the 9th Sephiroth there, which is Yesod. And the particular link here is it's ruled by the moon and subconsciousness, but also it gives us a creative input which relates back to the birth, death and creation associated with the 3. And the only other thing here that is of note here is we've got the lotus ones here. They are associated with the Egyptian goddess Isis, and you see her here with the lotus wand, and again she's associated with carrying the ankh there of creation. In terms of the transition between the Two of Wands and Three of Wands, I've spoken a fair bit about that already, where the Three of Wands is like a resolution of the conflicts and opposites in the Two of Wands. I haven't talked about the Three of Wands in relation to the upward pointing triangle of fire. That's the alchemical symbol for the element of fire. This implies, because if we look at the Three of Wands in terms of a fire, fires grow upwards, outwards, they sort of travel and expand the territory that they occupy. You know, we just need to look at wildfires to see just how devastating they can be and how fast they spread. So again, this symbolises like the growth that occurs in the person's life with regards to new business adventures. It's that fire that burns up the old energies of the past, resolves them so that you've got a level ground and a sense of clarity in moving forward. So it implies the Three of Wands has, it may not be a lifelong happiness because fires are by their very nature finite, and we discussed the finite nature of form on the Tree of Life section. But there is a sense of contentment with this card about where our life is at the present time. So that's the Three of Wands in relation to its the Two of Wands and the alchemical element of fire. In this next section, which again is very brief, we see the relationship that Crowley gives to the I Ching. This is why I find the Thoth deck so good, because it brings in so many different philosophies. This is hexagram 11 because there is 6 separate lines here, and it is called, that's why it's called a hexagram. Hex equals 6, and I think it's pronounced tie, and it consists of 2 trigrams. The first one here meaning earth, and the long lines here meaning heaven. And a definition for this, or a word to describe it, would be harmony. Sometimes you hear the word peace with regards to this, but I like harmony because peace indicates almost like an inaction, whereas this particular card, the Three of Wands, is quite an active card. And this hexagram is ruled by the Sun in Aries, which we've already talked about. So you have a harmony here, and that is between heaven and earth. And that's the association of the Three of Wands with the I Ching. So in the notes I've included a link to the site which goes through this. And so we come to the very last section of this video, and it's how the Three of Wands can play out in a Celtic crossbred. So if it's the very first card that's laid down, that's really the central theme of the spread, then the Three of Wands really relates to connecting with what inspires you, makes you feel valued, and applying that in your everyday life. So you have that inspiration and sense that your life has meaning. It can relate a lot. It relates a lot to the to your work environment, but it can relate to other areas, such as spiritual things, community work, things like that. Card number 2 is a crossing card. It obscures the energy of the 1, and it may mean that your work and daily life are not fulfilling. It could mean that we've made poor choices in the past. So a way to solve this is to make a list of your virtues and see how they can be used to chart your future in a different course. So with the Three of Wands in the Rider-Waite here, then ships are going in the direction that you want, you're not being guided and guiding them in a poor situation. For card 3, subconscious influences here. Again, could it mean that feeling that your life could be so much more rewarding if you find the right vocation? Perhaps you've always wanted to work for yourself, start your own business, for example, but because this is in position number 3, which is subconsciously, maybe you just haven't had the confidence to really connect with that, and so that needs to be brought to the surface consciously and worked on. Card number 4, recent past, could mean charity work, helping others, or a successful business adventure. Card number 5 is to do with hopes and goals, and the 3 of Wands here can mean to spend more time doing things that truly inspire you and bring the best out of you. Card number 6, your immediate future. A career opportunity will bring the best out of you, is just around the corner. Number 7, your internal self at this time. That's feeling inspired in what you're doing, being open in your heart and having that contentment. So a good card to have here, as long as it's obviously upright. Number 8 here, your external environment. It could mean that in your job, in your vocation, it might mean being a good listener, because those lotus wands are open here. So you've got that sense of being open in your heart, listening to others, receiving, empathy towards others, giving sound advice, that sort of thing. Guidance and warning, card number 9, 3 of Wands. So if you don't connect with that truly inspires you, which came from the Ace, you will continue to feel unfulfilled in your life or career. And finally, number 10, the overall outcome is work that you find motivated to do and that expresses your best talents and is supportive of others in the process. So this is an example of how the 3 of Wands can relate to a Celtic crossbred, but obviously you'd need to take other cards into account and the dignity of the 3 of Wands itself. Okay, that's a lot of information. Thank you ever so much for following and listening. I really appreciate it. The next video is going to be the next card, which is the 4 of Wands, or completion.